Some cities are not built with stone alone, but with blood, belief, and restless souls. Paris, long before it was the city of light, was a realm of fire, rebellion, and God. If you think Paris is only about fashion, romance, and art, you're standing on a fragile mask, barely hiding thousands of years of blood-soaked history and ancient ghosts still whispering in the stones. Before the Eiffel Tower, the Champs-Élysées, or the grandeur of Notre Dame, there was a wild tribe called the Parisii, dwelling along the banks of the Seine. In the shadowy forests of Gaul, they built a fortified settlement named Lutetia, shrouded in ritual, mystery, and sacred fire. Then came the Romans, iron ghosts marching through the night, driven by imperial ambition. They didn't just conquer, they resurrected the city in blood and stone, transforming it into a vital outpost of their empire. Paris became a battlefield of saints and heretics, where the blood of martyrs flowed into the sacred soil of Montmartre. Dungeons, churches, and Roman arenas coexisted like ancient portals into the darker depths of European. Are you ready to walk the labyrinth of the past? This is no fairy tale. This is a journey into the ancient soul of Paris, where every stone speaks and every street leads to a secret still waiting to be. Long before the Eiffel Tower pierced the sky, before the palaces, revolutions, or Renaissance ever rose from the earth, there was only forest, fog, and flickering firelight on raw stone. Long before the Eiffel Tower pierced the sky, before the palaces, revolutions, or Renaissance ever rose from the earth, there was only forest, fog, and flickering firelight on raw stone. Nearly 10,000 years ago, the first humans arrived at this sacred bend of the Seine River, to survive, to worship, and to bleed. Then, around 250 to 225 BCE, the Parisii, they were something older, something primal. They settled along the Seine and built a fortress called Lutetia. They made pacts with the gods and the earth itself, watched over by druids and warriors cloaked in animal hides, their eyes burning with unshakable resolve. In 52 BCE, the Roman war machine swept across Gaul like wildfire. Lutetia Parisirum. Rome did not merely invade, it rewrote the soul of the land. Upon sacred ground, they raised temples, public baths, and arenas, imposing marble, law, and order over what was once a sacred wilderness. In the 3rd century, a man named Denis appeared not with sword or spear but with faith. He preached Christianity and was beheaded atop a hill later known as Montmartre. The ground where he was buried became a place of pilgrimage, and later, a cathedral built from bone and belief. What began as a humble river settlement was now soaked in the blood of saints and citizens alike, one of the most sacred and haunted cities in all of human history. When the Roman Empire fell, Europe was plunged into darkness, and Paris was no exception. In the 5th century, from the ashes of a crumbling ancient world, a wild yet ambitious people rose, the Franks. Under the banner of Clovis I, they didn't merely seize Paris, they anointed it, baptizing the city as a new capital for the untamed West, where throne and sword began to merge with the cross. But power, as always, is fleeting. Under the Carolingian dynasty, Paris faded from glory, like a sacred relic drifting in the dreamless slumber of empire. No longer radiant, yet not forgotten, the city still breathed a sacred breath, a flickering oil lamp in the wind, trembling but never. Then came the 9th century, like a nightmare drawn from the sea. The Vikings, warriors from the frozen north, arrived on dragon-headed ships, sailing up the Seine not to conquer, but to burn memory itself. They left ashes where temples stood, silence where songs. And to survive, Paris had to build walls not just from stone, but from fear and blood. Yet light, stubborn, and eternal would rise again from ruin. By the 12th century, under the rule of the Capetian dynasty, Paris didn't just survive, it was. Every stone laid was no longer just shelter. It was the architecture of faith, of knowledge, of power. The Notre Dame Cathedral, Sainte-Chapelle, and the University of Paris were not mere structures. They were the pillars of the soul, anchoring a city transforming into the beating heart of Western Christian civilization. From ash and anguish, Paris rang its first bell of cultural empire. And though the dark still lingered in its corners, it was no longer the only force claiming the soul of this city. In the 16th century, under the reign of Francois I, Paris stepped into a radiant new era. But that light was not peaceful. It was a firelight born from the printing press, from pens sharp as blades, and from paintings that carved the human soul into canvas and memory. Culture, art, and knowledge erupted like flames in the night, burning away the last shadows of the... In the 17th century, Paris rose like an imperial capital in waiting. Palaces, plazas, academies emerged from the same ground once soaked with sweat and blood. In the shade of Versailles, where Louis XIV built his gilded kingdom, Paris continued to grow, swelling like a... Then came the 18th century, glorious on the surface, but rotting underneath. Beneath the carved domes and marble facades, thousands lived cramped in filth and hunger. Paris dazzled with monumental architecture, yet beneath it all were the groans of the poor, the stench of injustice, and a rage simmering in the dark alleys like kin. And in 1789, that match was struck. The fire of revolution didn't just burn the throne, it severed the soul of old Paris. King Louis XVI was executed, and the blade of the guillotine rang out like a death knell for the past. For the first time in millennia, Paris was no longer a city of kings. It had become the capital of the people of blood and of freedom. The fire of revolution didn't just burn the throne, it severed the soul of old Paris. The blade of the guillotine rang out like a death knell for the past. Paris was no longer a city of kings. It had become the capital of the people of blood and of freedom. Paris did not simply change, it was reborn through the storm. In 1799, a man rose from the smoke and fire of revolution and carved his name into the destiny of France, Napoleon Bonaparte. He didn't just seize power, he unlocked the gates of empire, and Paris became the capital of imperial ambition. On streets still soaked in the blood of revolution, he raised the Arc de Triomphe, laid stone bridges like the spine of an empire, and opened grand boulevards like arteries pulsing toward the heart of power. Paris was no longer just a city, it became a sacred ground of conquest, a new Rome at the center of modern Europe. But like all empires that defy freedom, Napoleon fell. In 1815, after his defeat at Waterloo, Paris descended into chaos. And from the ashes of that shattered glory, an entire century of rebellion would rise. July 1830, Paris rose against the crown. February 1848, the people once again overthrew a newly restored monarchy. And then the breaking point, the Paris Commune of 1871, the first socialist government in the city's history, born from the hands of workers themselves. But that dream was short-lived. Besieged, betrayed, and finally crushed in a sea of blood, the Commune didn't just collapse, it became a blazing scar in Paris's memory, where ideals and reality collided and shattered. The 19th century didn't just make Paris a symbol. It tore the city's soul in two, between glory and ruin, empire and people. And through it all, Paris learned how to burn brightly, even while engulfed in... Paris is not just a city, it is an ancient soul, one that has been burned, butchered, and torn apart by its own history. Every street is a scar, every stone, a whisper. It was never the light that made Paris, it was the darkness it survived. And if you dare to listen closely, you'll realize Paris has never stopped fighting. It simply learned how to burn bright with